Chairman Schiff, we've seen this before, Donald Trump's attack on the inspectors general, and now it includes anyone who says the wrong thing to Donald Trump's ear during this pandemic.
That's all too true. And of course, this is very dangerous. The Inspector General system was a post-Watergate reform designed to deal with the abuses of that era. And now those abuses are back. The president has systematically gone through and gotten rid of the Inspector General for the intelligence community, who reported to Congress that a whistleblower complaint was being withheld in violation of law. He got rid of the Inspector General that was going to oversee the release of the pandemic relief funds that could hold the president accountable, whether the president was using favoritism or cronyism in the allocation of relief funding or PPE to different states. And now going after that Health and Human Services Inspector General, who reported all too accurately that she was hearing from hospitals all around the country that they did not have the ventilators or the protective gear or the testing capacity, while the president was saying that all of that was going perfectly well. And because she contradicted, because the facts contradicted his preferred narrative, he views that as the ultimate disloyalty. But the result is a lack of accountability. And, you know, one final point on this, Lawrence, it doesn't have to be this way. The Congress could stand up to this president, but we have the confluence of a president who tramples on these norms and is not guided by ethics or anything else except self-interest, apparently, and a GOP in Congress that is too weak or too unwilling to do anything about it. If the Republicans would join us, we could put requirements into law today that say the president cannot remove an inspector general except for cause. I think when he's gone, we'll be able to do it, but the Republicans will not defend their own institutions right now, and it means that there's a real lack of accountability during a pandemic, and that is deadly dangerous.
And we can't act even slightly surprised by this because you told us this was going to happen in your argument in the Senate impeachment trial.
Well, we certainly told the senators that he was not going to change, and there was no way to constrain him, that he is who he is, and he would continue to operate the way he had. And indeed, that's exactly what we've seen since. Now, the one thing I think we dramatically understated is when we asked the question, if you found him guilty, do you really need to remove him, given that there's another election only 9 months away? How much damage could he really do? We said a lot, but little did we know just how great the casualties would be. You know, some days we lose the equivalent of the number of people we lost on 9/11. And, you know, I think that there's no way we could have foreseen just how tragic his malfeasance would be in the remaining months of his administration.